Bueno, pues si os parece, vamos a continuar con el seminario de la profesora Jennifer Greene. Ya la conocéis, así que no la voy a presentar de estos días. Y nada, simplemente introduzco la sesión de hoy, en la cual pues vamos a ir a una parte, digamos, la más controvertida de los métodos mixtos, que es la integración y el análisis de los datos. Empezó la profesora comentando una visión epistemológica y teórica desde la que partir, desde la que entender los métodos mixtos. El segundo día sigue explicando las distintas tradiciones y las distintas maneras de analizar esos métodos mixtos, y hoy vamos a profundizar un poco más lo que hemos ido comentando en el análisis de esos datos, la integración de las distintas perspectivas. Pues sin más, os dejo a la profesora.
Gracias, Ena. Me gustó mucho hablar con todos y estar aquí otra vez con todos. But now I will switch to English. I don't have a text for this presentation, so I especially welcome comments or questions at any time. There are several sections to the presentation, so I will stop specifically several times. But if you have a comment or a question at any time, please signal and we can stop. This is more of a guided exercise than a formal talk. I'm going to start with just a small review of mixed methods. I think most people I recognize who have been here yesterday or the day before, but I would still like to do that to contextualize this particular presentation, to put it in a particular place in the mixed methods theory and practice. So this will be. So the main purpose of this presentation is to provide a conceptual framework for thinking about integrated analysis in mixed methods work. The question of integrated analysis has come up, and I've said wait till Wednesday, and now it's Wednesday. But this essentially provides the guidance, but the guidance comes mainly from practice of how to take different forms of data and put them together. So that's what we're after here. Again, most of what I will offer comes from very smart and clever people doing this. The theory is more inductive than deductive. And I want to encourage all of us, myself included, to maintain an attitude of critique. I'm sure there will be analyses you just say, no, you can't do that. No, you can't do that. So please, this is not, I'm not preaching. I'm not saying, oh, here are all the things you must do. Rather, these are ideas, actual practices that have been done. And my expectation is that some of you will find some of them interesting and worth doing, and others will find others interesting and worth doing. So this is the plan for today. And again, the first two parts of this are a brief review of where we've been. And then the third part, the third part is the main component, the main presentation for today. But I would like to just go back a little bit and review a couple of key points we've made so I can locate this particular presentation in the field. And the comments, questions, challenges, discussion, number 4, you are welcome anytime. So starting with a view of mixing methods, this is my view. Mixing methods involves the intentional and connected or linked use of more than one social science tradition, methodology, and or method in service of the broad overall goal of better understanding. By tradition, this means some philosophical paradigm and set of assumptions logics of justification, privileged questions, ways of knowing. These are assumptions about the nature of the social world, the nature of the knowledge we can have about it, the kinds of methods that are most appropriate to develop our knowledge, and accompanying value stances. And there's examples listed at the bottom there. So we're mixing, we can mix at the tradition level, we can mix at the level of methodology, and this is the inquiry logic of a particular tradition of method. The inquiry logic includes questions, design, sampling, method choice, analysis, quality criteria, what constitutes good work, and defensible forms of writing. If you've ever noticed, this is not on the slide, if you've ever noticed in many researchers of post-positivist tradition still use the third person. The research showed, or the researcher did, whereas in many qualitative interpretive traditions, the researcher is named, I did this, I did that. And this is what I mean by defensible forms of writing. We have different rhetorical styles in different traditions. And then the third level of mixing is at the level of technique. Different forms of gathering method, not necessarily without all of the other surrounding aspects of methodology. So I mentioned this before, this is my version of what I think about as a mixed methods way of thinking, as a mixed methods way of approaching our efforts to try to understand important social and educational phenomena. And that is, it's an intentional invitation to come into the same inquiry space. The invitation is extended to multiple ways of seeing and understanding, multiple ways of doing social inquiry. And the idea is to engage respectfully and dialogically with these multiple ways of knowing towards generative insights and better understanding. Mixed methods is not a battleground. No estamos luchando. The notion of respect and dialogue is very important in my view. So the intentional and or connected or linked use, I'm going through these separately. This is the main purpose. There has to be some intention, there has to be some connection, and we're serving better understanding. Off text again. I had an email from a graduate student this morning who's doing a mixed methods dissertation. She had planned a dialogic kind of approach where along the way, her two methods, were going to inform one another so that it was going to be a conversation while the instruments were being formed, while the data were being collected, while the analysis was happening, and at the point of inferences. That was her plan. The plan has not worked. She's done method A and method B, all the way through an analysis. Often our plans don't work. That's the way it seemed the best to do in practice. So then she asked me, can I still mix methods? And my statement is, of course, you can mix at the point of making inferences. You can integrate at a level of inference, at a level of conclusion, at a level of results. That's one kind of mixed method study. It's not dialogic, but it's a different kind, and as long as you mix something, it's a mixed method study. So again, if she doesn't make any connection, I would call it a multiple method study. We're doing A and we're doing B, and this is what I learned from A, here's what I learned from B, thank you very much. Has to be mixed if it's to be a mixed method study. Then I also talked about the other day different purposes for mixing, and just to review these quickly. There are these 5 distinct purposes, some of which are more common than the other. And you can read them. We can mix for purposes of triangulation, where our different methods measure the same thing, and we're hoping for convergence. We can mix for purposes of expansion, expanding the reach of the study by using a method that extends the social phenomena being studied to another phenomenon. We can use the results of one study to develop the instrument, the measure, the sample for another method. Use the results of the first method, to develop another method, to choose the sample for a second method. We can use more than one method to study a phenomenon, or one methodology to study a phenomenon, to get more pieces of it, more parts of a phenomenon, which tend to be quite complex. And if we do any one of these, and the results don't agree, they're contradictory or they're divergent, we have a possibility for initiation. If we can pursue our different sets of results, continue to try to analyze it in different ways, bring in a different theory, bring in something else, we have the possibility of learning something that we hadn't anticipated, initiate findings. The 2 most common here in practice are development and complementarity. Far and away, the 2 most common. So then we talked a little bit about connections between purpose and design. And triangulation and expansion are labeled a component design. The 2 or more pieces stay separate until the end of the study when there's some connection. And the other 3 purposes, we plan to have some cross-checking or integration along the way that goes with that purpose. Integrated analyses are most relevant for integrated designs. So back to this, we are talking about doing a study for purposes of development, using the results of one to develop another, for complementarity, where we do have 2 sets or 3 sets of data on the same phenomena and we're trying to analyze them together, or for initiation when we get divergent results and there's some discord in the study. So this presentation, so this presentation is about integrated designs. Just wanted to locate this presentation in the larger domain. So now we'll move into this presentation on integrated data analysis. This general stage of data analysis looks familiar to all of us. Data cleaning simply means if you have a survey and the valid values are 1 to 5, and somewhere in your data set you have a 7, you have to fix that 7 because it doesn't belong. Or for interview data, most of the time when I do a set of interviews, there's at least one I'm not sure about. I'm not sure that the respondent was really telling the truth or was making him or herself look good, or I'm just not sure about it. So it's common practice to set that interview aside, conduct the analysis, and then after the analysis to see if your uneasiness is confirmed or not. So when I mean data cleaning, I mean we want to work with a data set in which we have confidence. Data reduction and description. This is developing one's, or testing out and confirming one's scales in a survey. Most surveys have scales. We don't try to measure complex phenomena with one survey item. We try to measure complex phenomena with 6 survey items. So data reduction is let's do analysis on our scales. Or let's take our 13 interviews and try to do a descriptive analysis of these interviews into some 12 descriptive themes or categories. So we're not talking about integrated analysis at the level of individual piece of data. Somebody might be able to do that, but you have to have an enormous storage capacity in your brain. So we're doing our descriptive and reductive analyses first. We get our scales, we get our interview themes, we look at our observation data and do some reduction of all the individual things we've observed. And then the mixed methods, the integrated analysis kicks in at this level. Okay, now a few principles. These are my principles. I probably borrowed some from others, but I'll claim them. Decisions about analytic strategies and procedures in a mixed method study are importantly connected to, but not dictated by, prior methodological decisions. This simply means that different purposes for mixing can call for different kinds of analytic strategies. So that's what I mean connected to. For a given purpose, we might choose one kind of integrated mixed method strategy. But if that doesn't work, we could try something else. So there's a coherence and a logic to a study, but we shouldn't feel obligated to stick with that logic if it's not working. That's all this means. Interactive mixed methods analyses are highly iterative and best undertaken with a spirit of adventure. Some things don't work out at all. That's not every creative idea for interactive analyses will generate sensible or meaningful results. The ultimate mixing happens inside your head. It's a cognitive analytic activity, as are all inferences in social science. The analysis won't tell you the result. You still have to infer it. And I just think that's true of all of our work. These interactive analyses, this comes from a study. I could find a reference if it comes from a mixed method study. Interactive analyses, ideally, should include planned stopping points or decision points at which the inquirer stops and considers what are the ways in which one analysis can inform the other. We have a plan, but it's very good to stop periodically and reassess that plan. If you don't plan a stopping point, it doesn't happen. We're too busy. We have too many things to do, and we carry on with the study without stopping and saying, well, what's going on here? How might I do some integration of what I've been learning? So that comes from experience. Convergence, consistency, and corroboration are overrated. The interactive mixed methods analyst looks just as keenly for instances of divergence and dissonance, as these may represent important nodes for further and generative analytic work. Challenges, the last one, challenges to data quality and integrity can arise in interactive mixed methods analysis as the data themselves become changed, even transformed into other frames and forms. And that's where I expect some of you will raise your hand and say, you can't do that. So please, raise your hand and say, you can't do that. This is the conceptual framework as it is. It's a description of what I found in the literature. And there's, on the left, there's three main categories or three main places where analysis, mixed methods analysis can happen. And on the right are labels for the various examples that I have found. And what I'd like to do is go through an example of each of these. So we'll start there, data transformation.
Excuse me, wait a moment, or a question or organization.
Yeah.
Todo el mundo podrá tener la presentación. Sí. Lo digo porque estáis haciendo fotografías y tranquilos que luego la pasamos en formato PDF.
Sí, claro. So, start with data transformation. Sí, por cierto. So data transformation is to enable joint analysis of data from two different sources. But we have to get the data in the same form in order to do some joint analysis. In some mixed method studies, this has also been presented as an ability to discern multidimensional patterns in qualitative data, which is extremely difficult to do just with our brains. Maybe some people have brains that can do this, but it's very hard to see. Qualitative data are too dense. They're too idiosyncratic. They're too rich. So some data sets may have patterns, but it's very hard to see them. So two main types, I keep saying so far, this is not a finished product or a fixed way of thinking about this. These arise from a collection of examples. Conversion and consolidation. Some cautions, at least a few. If one thinks that this kind of analysis would be good in a study that you're doing, you have to think about this at the beginning of the study in order to either collect both sets of data on the same people, or perhaps for your interview or your qualitative sample, have enough people in the sample, if you aim to convert to numbers, that will allow a numerical analysis. So this has some implications for design. And there's cautions of the assumptions of analysis. This article referenced is a wonderful article. It comes from the Journal of Mixed Methods Research. And there's a section in the article that reminds us what it really means to count in social science. In order to count something, you have to decide what one unit is. Let's say we're studying students' academic self-concept, how they think of themselves as students. And we want a structured measure that will yield numbers. What's one unit of self-concept? We have to decide that. It's arbitrary. It's one item or two items or half an item. We assume all items have equal weight. We make a lot of assumptions when we quantize. This researcher, Margaret Sandalowski, she's a nursing researcher of nursing. So in her field, there are some things that actually have a unit of 1 or 2 or 3, blood pressure. But lots of other things that nurses study do not. So it's just a good reminder that in the social world, very few things have inherent numerical value. We're always deciding what the numbers mean. So this is the first example. This comes from the southwestern part of the United States. And this is a program of research that these researchers are conducting, part of which has a methodological agenda, develop an integrative mixed methods methodology from over a decade of pilot research. And quoting from this article, the need persists for a methodology that affords a concurrent, rigorous, and integrative analysis of the richness of text narratives and the precision in measurement and hypothesis testing afforded by quantitative approaches. This is their methodological agenda. And they also see this agenda as serving the last point to generate deep structure conclusions. Conclusions deeply embedded in a strong theoretical context. So this is their conceptual framework for an integrated mixed methods approach. And they see this approach focused on understanding better an important construct, which is the same way that I see it. So this works for me. We're focusing on understanding a construct, a complicated construct, academic self-concept, a sense of efficacy, motivation to do well in school, career aspirations. These are all constructs that we study. So this is the set of stages that this team of researchers has for their mixed methods work. The stage 1 is design and planning. That happens separately. Data collection also happens separately. We're talking about the different methods in the study. Then this third step is the data conversion step, converting qualitative codes to numeric scales to themes and categories, taking one form and converting it to the other. Stage number 4 is the analysis of the original and transformed data together. Stage 5 is interpretation and recontextualization. That won't mean anything till you see it in the example, but it's an extremely important part of this framework. And then integration and inferences. This is their framework. And I'd like to illustrate this with an example from their article. This is a program of research they've done on machismo. This is the southwestern part of the US, in which there are many families from South America and especially Mexico living. So there's a big Hispanic population in that part of the country. This research has been done with a Lactica interview protocol, informal conversation, I think. So they conduct an interview with people. Then they do a grounded theory type analysis. I'll leave that. Developing thematic categories, and they get some cross-validation. And I'm taking small pieces of what they did for illustration. What they did is much more elaborate than I'm presenting. But you see that my examples are, they have 2 sets of thematic categories. They have more, but I'm using 2 of theirs, for example. Machismo beliefs, and they include honor, respect, and self-control. Family-oriented, abusive, disrespectful toward women, and then machismo, self-identification, which denies negative traits, and has an identification as a man, endorses the male role. Okay, so they did some interviews, analyzed the data, and these are 2 of the categories they came up with, descriptive categories. So the next stage is some kind of transformation or conversion of these data in this example. They quantified these data in 2 ways. They added a dimensionalization by a scale coding to each respondent's responses. So the 2 ways that they quantified these data were to make a judgment about the intensity of the response on a 4-point scale. So for each participant in the interviews, they looked at the themes for machismo and machismo self-identification and judged the intensity of that response. Low is 1, little bit lower, less low, 2, a little bit high, 3, and very high, 4. It's a judgment. I'm sure they got cross-verification among the research team. And they also had a second quantitative indicator. How many times did that theme show up for that respondent? How many times did that respondent mention that particular category? Because there were multiple categories. So the claim on the bottom here, this transforms qualitative categories to thematic variables, that's their label, which then can be analyzed statistically, correlated with other quantitative variables they have, used in a regression analysis, or whatever. And that's what they did. They analyzed the data and generated some relationships between the qualitative scales, qualitative categories transformed to quantitative data, and other variables that they had studied. And then what they did, I think, is very worthy, very good idea. They recontextualized, They went back to the qualitative data for interpretation of the results that they'd gotten. In a development design, which this is, use the results of one to help develop another, they went back to the qualitative data to help interpret the correlations that they got. And that's not very often done. We get our data and we analyze it and we go on. But this notion of going back to the qualitative data to say, what does this correlation mean? How can I interpret it? I strongly support that. I think it's a very good strategy. And as they say, to select quotes, they recontextualize the qualitative results, relate statistically derived outcomes back to select indicated quotes to generate stories that give voice to the very people who stated them. And here's an illustration of that. So they were relating the thematic variables. These are the quantitized qualitative themes to a measure of life satisfaction. What does your sense of machismo beliefs and sense of machismo self-identification have to do with your report of your own life satisfaction? They went back to the qualitative data to answer that question more fully, and they found, back to the slide, the men who reported that they were high on life satisfaction said things like, I care about my family. For me, it's acting like a gentleman. And they were able to make a claim at the bottom of this slide that men who value and engage in family caretaking exhibit high levels of caballerismo in their male gender role, identity, are giving and responsible. That interpretation comes from the qualitative data that they went back to. And then on the other end, men who reported that they were low on life satisfaction. For example, I have my flaws, I'm selfish, I hold a grudge forever, I don't identify with working hard or taking care of my family. And from going back, the authors made a conclusion of men who do not value or are not engaged in family caretaking exhibit low levels of caballerismo in their male gender role, identity, and they're selfish and irresponsible. So this is an example of conversion of data, qualitative to quantitative, analyzing the quantitative results with another quantitative measure. But they're going back to the qualitative data to make richer interpretations of what those correlations meant. You can see at the back. I would have also liked to see an example of where they took some numbers and qualitized them. But that's okay. Okay, this is on to the next example. So any comments, complaints, questions about the first one? So this is an old study, 1982. Some of you weren't around then. It's an old study, but I have not seen